Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, our speaker today is known to many of us. John Martin teaches Vipassana, or insight meditation, and he leads meditation retreats, LGBTQI themed, and focusing on Metta, loving kindness. He also leads an ongoing weekly Monday evening meditation group in the Castro, and is the co-guiding teacher for the LGBT Queer Sangha at the Insight Meditation Center in Redwood City. John serves on both the Spirit Rock Teachers Council and the Governing Teachers Council. He has a dedicated practice while being engaged in the working world and emphasizes practice for daily life. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jerry. So good to be together with the Sangha and see so many friends and so many folks I've seen over the years, and see some new folks as well. And just as a teacher, I like to always say that everyone since the time of the Buddha is welcome to the practice and belongs in the practice. The Buddha didn't exclude anyone from this practice. And the Buddha said that every single being has a seed within for awakening, the potentiality for awakening, the Buddha nature within, the perfect purity of the heart, the clarity of the mind within that we practice to realize directly. I'd like to begin with a quote from Ram Dass. I only learned after Ram Dass died that he was gay. This great spiritual, mystical teacher, leader. It's from Ram Dass. I would like my life to be a statement of love and compassion. And where it isn't, that is where my work lies. I love that statement. It's an inspiring statement. I'd like my life to be a statement of love and compassion. And yet there is more work to be done. And the work to be done is most of all about being present, here and now, to be present, connected in the body, to be present in the world with an open heart. And yet it can seem enormously challenging. How can we be open when there's so much pain, so much suffering in the world, the time we live in, with COVID, with racism, global warming, trans homophobia, all the challenges we have in our own personal lives? How can we be present for it all and still be open to the joys of life, to the beauty of life? How can we be grateful even for the smallest things in difficult times? And the support we need that I'm going to speak to today is equanimity. Equanimity is a beautiful quality of the heart, also an awakening factor that supports the release of the heart from confusion. So this quality of equanimity that I'll explore in the talk today, and then hopefully have plenty of time for questions, comments. So equanimity is a balanced, spacious quality of the heart and mind. Equanimity accepts the present moment just as it is, with a space of calm and balance and receptivity. Equanimity recognizes the present moment can't be different. This very moment can't be different than it is. And yet it's so easy to get caught, to try and change, to try and resist this present moment. This very moment can't be different. Appropriate actions, appropriate words may be necessary to address a wrong. And yet we can accept the present moment as it is, even if it's painful or difficult. So it invites a sense of peace and calm amongst all of the ups and downs of life when we cultivate equanimity. And it acknowledges what the Buddha spoke of that 10,000 sorrows and 10,000 joys. Equanimity allows our hearts to be open, receptive, to experience it all, and really to be more present for the whole of our lives, to be present in a more intimate way with our own experience and to be more intimate with others. So it arises very naturally at times, equanimity, and we may not recognize it. So I want to emphasize that recognition of equanimity is important. The Buddha said it's important to recognize when this quality is present, to appreciate it as a benefit of the practice of being present. And by recognizing it, we support its future arising. One of the times we may experience it, but not name it, is when we experience a sudden shock in our lives. Maybe we suddenly learn of a close friend or a loved one or family member who's died. And in that moment, we recognize it's like this. It can't be different. It's like this now. There's no changing it. And we may feel grief, we may feel sorrow, a natural condition that we would feel those things. But we also may feel some sense of peace, the peace of equanimity that acknowledges it can't be different. As painful as it is, it can't be different. I've heard from many friends, practitioners who receive a health diagnosis, a very serious health diagnosis, and acknowledge that sometimes they felt this profound sense of peace in the acceptance of that. It's also the peace that comes forward when we come close to the suffering that the Buddha spoke of, that is a part of life. And the Buddha calls upon us to come close to suffering. When we come close to suffering with a heart of acceptance, often this beautiful quality of equanimity comes forward. So we can acknowledge it's like this now. It's like this now. And I care. It still has a caring quality. Just before COVID hit, a very dear friend of mine was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it came pretty suddenly. I wasn't expecting it. And saw him about a week later. And it was quite amazing. It was most strongly present that I felt for him was this equanimity. He didn't name it that way. He wasn't a practitioner, but a sense of great peace and acceptance. It's like this. This is the way it is. And as difficult with all the emotions he was experiencing, there was that sense of peace that provided some sense of balance for him and allowed his heart to still be open to joy, to gratitude, to the beauty of nature that he so appreciated. And my time with him, that first time, and he expressed this many times afterwards when I talked to him and went for walks, he expressed this great gratitude and great happiness for all the things he had had in his life, for having a loving husband, dear friends, being able to enjoy so much time in nature that he so greatly valued. So he was able to be present for both the suffering of life, recognizing we all face sickness, ultimately face death, and yet we can still be present for the joys of life, even in those most difficult times. with this support of the calm, peaceful acceptance, balance of equanimity. I'd like to, in this talk, share a little bit more about understanding equanimity. It's a hard concept, at least it was for me coming into the practice, to understand how we can cultivate it in our practice, in our lives, and then in how it supports an opening of the heart. So equanimity is a heart quality factor, and speak to equanimity as a wisdom factor, and then how it supports us in taking wise action in the world. So equanimity is supported by just being present. When we're present, here and now for a direct experience, there's a level of acceptance that's beginning to open up toward this deeper quality of equanimity. I often, in my own practice, drop in the phrase. This is a phrase that Ajahn Sumedho used. It's like this. It's like this now. It's like this now and I care is another way of saying it. For many years in my practice, I use the equanimity phrase, may I accept things exactly as they are, even if I may wish them to be different. The recognition the present moment can't be different, but the acknowledgement that I wish it to be different. So maybe I'm not feeling well. Maybe I'm connecting with a friend suffering. And I bring in the equanimity by acknowledging what's present, but also acknowledging I wish it to be different. You could experiment with the phrases if you haven't done this before and see what works for you. It may change from time to time. Equanimity can become at times a stronger factor throughout our lives. It's still subject to arising and passing, but you can think of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, maybe folks who are inspired by teachers where there's a sense of greater calm and peace. It feels like a more abiding presence. Beautiful benefits that can come forward in our practice. Sharon Salzberg says, equanimity is a state of peace, to be able to accept things as they are. It is to be at home in our lives. It's to be at home in our lives because it allows us to be more fully present for all the moments of our lives, without a sense of clinging, but with a more spacious, balanced kind of acceptance. And there's a letting go. There's a letting go that comes with equanimity. Letting go of needing to control. Letting go of things needing to be different to find peace and ease. Sometimes equanimity is described as being like a radiant calm, or even experienced as kind of an unshakable peace. So sometimes I drop it into my practice. I was feeling some agitation in the last couple of days, and also remorse. I had made a judgment, someone I do some work with, that I thought they had made a mistake, and in an email, it was somewhat polite, but I said they had made a mistake, and I was wrong. And I was really feeling remorse and having come to a judgment without understanding things and feeling like I had caused harm. I could feel the mind wanting to turn away from this and to grasp onto, no, I was right. Didn't want to let go of my being right. And kind of it was a sense of turning away from this experience, to feel the discomfort, to feel the dis-ease. I would just drop in the phrase, it's like this now. It's like this now. Then I could feel some sense of compassion for myself, feel the remorse of not taking a skillful action, and feel a heart connection to the person I may have caused some harm to by making the judgment. It's like this now. This very moment, it's like this now. It's a beautiful description of equanimity in the first lines of the Verses of the Faith Mind, Sing Sun. It begins, The great way is not difficult for those not attached to preferences. When neither attachments nor ill will arise, all is clear and undisguised. So the great way not difficult for those not attached to preferences. So in effect, Saying San is saying we can still have preferences, but the important thing is to let go of the attachments, letting go of attaching our happiness to having perfect health, or letting go of our attachment to others in our lives behaving the way we would ideally like them to behave. Even letting go when we become engaged in causes we believe in, and maybe to address global warming or address the racism that's still so prevalent in our country. Even when we engage, we can let go of the specific outcome we might be seeking to obtain. We do what's right. We do what's right because we believe it's right. But when we let go of attaching to a specific outcome, there's an ease and peace that can come with that. And we open to greater possibility too. We really open to the unknown. Sometimes our acts may be of benefits in ways that we might never have expected. So equanimity, unlike indifference, equanimity has a sense of caring. When we have this sense of spaciousness and calm, our hearts are naturally responsive to feel suffering and also to feel joy. Indifference is actually the near enemy of equanimity. And indifference has a feeling of whatever. So if you kind of mentally note or even say the words whatever, there's a dismissiveness and a quality of like not mine, kind of a separateness. Equanimity has a connection to others, has a connection to the suffering of others, and to the joy of others. And the far enemy is attachment. When we attach our happiness to outcomes, attach our happiness to our preferences, to getting what we prefer, that's the opposite of equanimity. So give an example of how equanimity can support a more open and spacious heart. Now, equanimity, of course, is one of the four beautiful qualities of the heart that the Buddha spoke of. The four qualities are loving kindness, compassion, supportive joy, and equanimity. So a few weeks ago, I was teaching on a 10-day Metta retreat, loving kindness retreat, and online. And I kind of sink into the retreat mode when I'm teaching. I was pretty quiet. My heart was very open, sensitive. I was preparing for an equanimity, talk on equanimity. So I was practicing with equanimity with the phrases. And for whatever reason, I decided to kind of test my practice a little bit by walking out down Market Street and then down Castro Street on a Saturday night before my talk, and practice with the open, responsive heart. So with some sense of loving kindness, some benefits of equanimity, it's just walking down the street. And I could see suffering. I could see homeless people. And I could have some sense of heart connection and the recognition of compassion, recognition of suffering, and compassion arises. It wasn't big and grand, but I just felt some sense of compassion. So from a space of kindness, the spaciousness of equanimity, there was a responsiveness of the heart. It recognized his suffering, wished it to end. When I came up against an edge of practice, there was a homeless person yelling and screaming right next to me on the sidewalk as I passed by. Heart wasn't open. I wasn't able to feel compassion in that moment. That's the edge of practice. I saw many people on the street who were very happy out on a Saturday night having fun with friends. I could feel some sense of supportive joy, the responsiveness of the heart to recognize the joy of others and wish to continue. And then there was a little bit of edge when I saw some folks have been partying quite a bit. Maybe weren't very clear-minded, but they still seem to be happy. That was an edge, or I couldn't quite feel like I wanted to celebrate that happiness. Edge of practice. And there was a moment where just with the openness, responsiveness of the heart, there was a moment of tathata, what the Buddha spoke of as this, the suchness, the beauty of the moment. And there's no hanging on. Right there on Castro Street on a Saturday night, it just seemed perfect. All of the lights, all of the activities, the suchness that can arise in any moment when we're not clinging. It's a beautiful moment. But then there was a clinging to that moment, and it dropped away. If there's any clinging, the heart and mind are not entirely open and free. So equanimity supports this malleability of the heart so that our hearts can be responsive to recognize the suffering of others and wish it to end, and be open to celebrate the happiness of others and wish it to continue. Equanimity very much has this quality of caring. So as an awakening factor, equanimity, it's the seventh factor of awakening. The seventh enlightenment factor. And Joseph Goldstein says one could say the whole of the path rests on the maturing of this powerful enlightenment factor. It allows us to see and be most intimate, to see and know the deepest layers of suffering. The call of the practice, one of the calls of our practice, is to see and know suffering. A radical teaching to turn towards suffering, to be intimate with it. By being intimate with it, we can see the cause of suffering and see that we can, in fact, be free of the mental suffering, where we can't be free of old age, sickness, and death, but we can be free of the mental suffering that comes with the resistance, the reactivity to the present moment experience. We can realize peace in any moment when we're not clinging, when we're not hanging on or pushing away. We all experience these moments of peace, and we can open to deeper and deeper levels of peace with our path of practice. The Buddha defined a mind filled with equanimity as abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Sounds pretty great benefits of equanimity that the Buddha described. And the Buddha relied upon equanimity in his practice on the night of the Buddha's awakening. Profound equanimity. He fully realized the truth of the way things are. He saw the full extent of suffering, the full suffering of the world. It said the Buddha could see the suffering of the past, the present, the future of the entire world, and able to hold it with compassion. And yet, in the Buddha's life, he was known as a happy one. He fully realized the truth, heart fully open to suffering, and yet he was known as a happy one. His heart had been freed from all confusion, from all clinging, to be able to be at peace with things as they are. Oh, this beautiful quality of the heart, this wisdom quality can support us in our lives for all the ups and downs. All the ups and downs of our lives, so that we can be more fully present, even when we experience the vicissitudes of life that Buddha spoke of. Equanimity arose for me. I came into the practice about 20 years ago. I hear teachers talk about equanimity, but it took me some time to really understand it and to recognize that it actually had arisen in earlier times in my life, but I just didn't know the words to describe it. And I look back and I think that one of the areas where equanimity arose for me, maybe some of you may connect with this, is during the AIDS crisis, especially in the 80s and 90s, when so many people were dying. For me, especially in the early 90s, when I lost many friends and was with friends right as they died, I felt a great sense of peace. My heart was breaking, but I felt a great sense of peace in just being fully present. It's hard to be anything other than fully present in the face and presence of death. And I felt a great sense of peace that later I could recognize as equanimity. And I felt somehow closer to the truth at that time. And I had no idea what that meant, but it was just a sense of being closer to the truth. And actually became a calling for me to come into the practice because something was touching the heart at some deep level that I couldn't even put words to. So the recognition of equanimity when it is present is important and can be a great value in strengthening its future arising in your own life, in your own practice. Equanimity can also be a source of great strength and courage. When we speak and act from a foundation of peaceful acceptance of things as they are, with the intention of kindness, love, compassion, we can find a greater courage to be present in the face of suffering and then to speak and act with great strength and conviction. I think particularly of great leaders like Martin Luther King, so deeply committed to nonviolence, to non-harming, able to see and speak to the suffering of racism and speak to the wrongs in our society in a very clear and strong and peaceful voice. And gave him kind of a commanding voice, speaking from this place of love and peace. Think of also Nelson Mandela, who didn't seek any retribution against his jailers. And when the white government of South Africa started to hand over to the power to him, they said, what are you going to do to us? Are you going to get even with us? This is what we're afraid of. And he said, enough of the violence and the harm. And instead he engaged in truth and reconciliation processes, stopping the cycle of hatred. And instead he had this great intention for peace and love. Leaders like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, great voices in the world, speaking and acting for peace and love. And we can bring this into our own lives. We don't have to be great leaders at a world level, but we can have this intention of cultivating love and acceptance, presence, being more fully present in the world with an open heart, and the clarity that comes with the peaceful acceptance of things as they are. I want to make sure we have time for questions, so I think I'll wrap it up in a minute. So again, the Buddha mentioned this earlier, the vicissitudes of life. I felt this, I really could connect with this coming into the practice. I was so whipsawed around by the vicissitudes of life. What the Buddha spoke of as praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain. And we can get whipsawed by these vicissitudes. And if we have this support of calm, peaceful acceptance of things as they are, with the support of equanimity that Bhikkhu Bodhi describes as there in the middleness of it all, we can see the containing, the ups and downs of our lives, the changes in our lives, and hold it with some sense of calm and balance, and not get tipped over, overwhelmed when we have the support of equanimity, and allowing our hearts to be more fully open, allowing a greater trusting of the heart, a greater clarity to come forward. So just to end, the support of equanimity, our practice is being present here and now with the support of our bodies, most of all, this first foundation of mindfulness, being present in the body, supports the possibility of our realizing peace. Peace is possible in any moment. We know this for our own lives when we're not clinging, when we're not holding on, just present here and now, not looking to the past, looking to the future, just present here and now. We can experience peace. And the more we practice in being present here and now, the more we recognize, appreciate the moments of peace, the more often they'll come forward in the future. Ultimately, our practice supports us realizing nothing is missing in our own hearts. Really, all of the beautiful qualities of our hearts are already here. We just practice to realize that everything we seek is already here. This is from Mingyur Rinpoche. The insight that the Buddha discovered is so simple and yet so difficult to accept. His teachings introduce us to a dormant, hidden, unrealized part of ourselves. This is a great paradox of the Buddhist path, that we practice in order to know what we already are, therefore attaining nothing, getting nothing, going nowhere. We seek to uncover what has already been, what's already here. So that's the offering of my sharing of the Buddha's teachings, and happy to engage in a discussion. I always appreciate the questions and discussions that follow. Yes, Anya.
Hi, thank you so much. It's my first time here. And yeah, I do agree that equanimity is a difficult one for me to wrap my head around. I'm wondering about, so I often, as a way to accept a condition that doesn't feel great to me, like a moment of suffering, I'll tell myself, well, this is temporary. This too shall pass. Everything is constantly changing. Is that a way that I'm not in equanimity in that moment? Like, is that kind of a squirrel or like a mind state that's taking me out of what you're speaking of? And I'm just curious how those two things would come together.
It's a great question. As it is true, it is arising and passing. It's a useful support for practice, but it's also can be a moment of curiosity and an act of compassion to acknowledge I'm suffering and I feel the suffering. So equanimity, it's like this, I feel the suffering. So coming close to the suffering is what I'd suggest, to actually feel maybe the agitation in the heart and mind, or maybe feel the discomfort that you might be feeling in the back. And what's this like? And then be aware of it through the direct experience, that the experience is changing moment to moment. And either the emotion or the sensation does pass away. But to know that through the direct experience rather than the thinking it's going to pass away. You see the difference I'm pointing to? Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, that was sort of what I was suspecting to be the case. I'm trying to overlay and not accept this by giving myself some kind of mental narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. Great. And there's an insight right there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. And I see Jeff's hand raised.
Thank you, John, for a great talk, as always. You know, I had the experience even before the talk began in the meditation for the first time that, like a talk I was listening to from Ram Dass the other day, that, you know, what our loving awareness is really not sensible. It doesn't come from the senses, you know, and that we so often turn to the senses. And for the first time, I had the experience that was sort of, well, that it was functioning perfectly, all those thoughts and, you know, sensations, just like a pinball machine functions with the pinball in it. It's the way a human birth is supposed to work, and it was kind of a treat. But you mentioned at one point that there's still a subject to arising and passing is equanimity. Did you mean until it's abiding, or?
The Brahma Viharas, these divine abodes of the heart, loving kindness, compassion, supportive joy, equanimity, are not permanent things. So they're still subject to arising and passing in that way. But for someone you can think of like Ram Dass or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there is a more pervading sense of loving kindness and a piece of equanimity that one might be aware of in their presence. But it's not a thing. Ultimately, it's not a thing. It's a quality that arises.
Okay.
For someone with that depth of practice of Ram Dass, for instance, it is a more pervading quality that's present because of the strength of their practice.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions and comments?
John, my name is Paul. I felt lucky that I only knew one person who had COVID, but unfortunately she died. She's a relative a little younger than I am.
Mm.
And I just really loved her and knew her as a terrific person, had a real heart connection with her. And I wasn't practicing anything, but I was thinking as you were talking, I wrote this really lovely poem, very metaphysical, and it helped me acknowledge her and acknowledge my grief at the same time. And I could have stuck with that grief a lot longer than I did. There were moments after that, where I'd suddenly get hit by it and cry and, normal stuff. But I didn't hang with it. And my favorite cousin is dying of cancer, and that's fairly hard. I feel so helpless. She lives in New York, and I can't see her. And we really aren't as close as brother and sister, but as cousins, we're really, really close. So I just have to accept that she will have the support that she needs to go through this, and that she'll be okay. So these are just ways I was thinking as you were talking of ways where I have really, without formally practicing it, used equanimity to not get bogged down in negative feelings. And there's so much negative. It's hard to watch the news. It's so negative, and it's really hard not to get bogged down there. So I really appreciate your reminders about the practice of equanimity and how important it is. Thank you.
Thank you for your sharing, Paula. I really, I'm sorry for the loss of your loved one and what you're facing with another dear friend, dear sister, you said, who has cancer? Cousin. And just another way I'd suggest a practice you could bring in if you're able to do. Grief really has its own way. Like we really just allow grief and make space for grief. And a great tool I found, if you're physically able, is to just go for short walks and just not have any agenda, not say I'm going to feel grief, just go for a walk and just be aware of the space, the sky, feel your body, and just make room for whatever emotions, feelings might be felt. And you're holding a lot and giving yourself some space. There's other ways of just giving yourself space. Maybe just sitting in a chair looking out the window. I have a nice view of the sky from my seat here, and sometimes I'll just support a sense of spaciousness by looking out the window and looking at the sky. So just some suggestions. And the Buddha would say, be compassionate for yourself too, to recognize and acknowledge the discomfort you might feel, the pain you might feel. And the wise response, I feel this suffering. May I be free of suffering, even as you're feeling the suffering of your cousin who has cancer. So thank you for sharing, Paul.
Hi, John.
Hi, I don't see who's speaking yet.
My name is Ron.
Hi, Ron. Okay.
Thank you for your talk. Equanimity is always such a hard one for me because I always play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game, I guess. When people say this moment, I've heard that before. People say, or people in Sangha talks say, this moment couldn't have been any different. I have a little trouble wrapping my head around why that moment couldn't have been any different. Perhaps because I like clinging to remorse. I don't know. But could you expand on that somewhat? Why could this moment not be any different?
Now, if I'm going to ring a bell, like now you're hearing a sound. There's no choice in the matter. There was this hearing of the sound of the bell. There's no choice in the matter. It's just, this is what's known now. And, you could find the ringing of the bell unpleasant and decide, I'm going to end this call now. And so the next moment you could take an action. But the moment of hearing the bell, in that moment, it couldn't be different. And it's such a powerful tool to support us. Like, because when we start bringing to awareness to our practice, what's present now? Okay, maybe you're meditating at home when you hear the neighbor's barking dog. And then the mind falls into reactivity. Why doesn't the neighbor keep that dog quiet? You can see that this force of suffering taking hold, the reactivity. And if one is able to, as I practice with this a lot, just like hearing the sound, it's just a sound. It's just a sound. And if I practice acknowledging what's present, I don't have to fall into reactivity. I don't have to fall into aversion around the hearing of the barking dog. So the very present moment, the accepting of the present moment, and then bringing attention to how we cling to the experience. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't have been like that. And suffering is taking hold. So it's an exploration point. It's more like, Ron, I'm suggesting it being more like an exploration point, to look at the present moment, observe how the mind can cling to that experience, either hold on because it's pleasant, push away because it's unpleasant. Make this a place for exploration in your practice. And I like to emphasize that it doesn't mean, though, that we don't address the wrong. But clearly, you think of the leaders I spoke about in the world who took action. They saw the wrong, but they had this sense of great peace in their presence that gave them that commanding presence of love and peace to have strong voices. They accepted the present moment, but they said, this is wrong. We need to take action. We need change. I don't know if is that helpful, Ron? I don't know if I directly answer your question, but I'm not sure I can.
I think it's something to mull over for me. Yeah. It's a more expansive way of looking at it. I think an exploration, like you said, I could explore those moments more.
Yeah, really, the exploration in the moment to moment experience is what I suggest, and maybe perhaps particularly in moments of meditation. But sometimes I just do a little tracing back in my own practice, where I'll be in a call. And the mind will get triggered, and I'll feel some aversion and anger coming up, and I'll trace back, what just happened? there was hearing. There was a hearing of a sound, a hearing of a voice, and there was a perception of what was said, and it was unpleasant, and there was a reactivity to that. So what really happened was there was hearing, and it was unpleasant. And this whole round of suffering started. And if I can just recognize it as it was just hearing, and there was what was said was unpleasant, I can break the cycle and not fall into reactivity. So this is this is kind of an exploration of practice. And this is where we can learn to see where the mind suffers and see and understand that we can be free of that reactivity of the mind that is the source of the mental suffering in our lives. We can be entirely free of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else?
We have a couple of hands raised.
Okay, I can't see them.
Chris is one. Chris?
Okay.
It seemed like that's all day, and now with what the last three people have said, my mind just went all over the place. Like you said, John, I couldn't figure out what equanimity was when it was first presented. It was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And I almost had a reaction to it, such as like someone named patience or chastity, or there was something that I got almost rebellious against it, because it was like, I don't get this, and I'm not whatever this is. And I was also told many, 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 many times by many, many, many teachers the importance of practicing with it or looking for it. And so as I practiced with the other Brahma Viharas, they seem to have loosened up that definition or opened it up for me. And it was often said by teachers, equanimity is sort of the king or queen of top of the practices. It shows up in the factors of enlightenment, and okay, yeah, I'll try. Yeah, what, I want to choke that person right now.
Mm-hmm.
And as I found it start to arise in my practice through patience and noticing and sitting and breathing over many kalpas, it seems like these past few decades, it starts to arise. All of a sudden, you do notice it. It's like, wow, that's what they're talking about. And it's big.
Mm-hmm.
It's really big. And there it goes. Now I want to fix it, whatever. But at that moment, I'm feeling such clarity right now. How I normally would have reacted to that, I didn't. And there's some space. Now I'm going to fix it. Now I'm going to react to it. And it's sort of like just allowing that little space to notice it in one's life. And then just that feeling state. It's a real physical feeling, actually, like many things in practice. And you can sort of start to open it in your life. And it's sort of there without trying to get it or trying to be it. So it's still a work in process, certainly. And what you had to say today has been really important to my practice. Thanks so much. So I just thought I'd offer that out.
Beautiful reflections. Great. That making space and being present with the intention of kindness and compassion, and the sense of intention of acceptance and allowance. Like acceptance is a starting point, making space for the deeper quality of equanimity to begin to come forward.
And those little catches, those little foibles that would catch me where I would not be equanimous are really losing their weight. They're really losing their weight. I can see them arise. It's like, been there, done that. Maybe my perception's off right now. Maybe I'm not seeing it clearly. A lot of it's not. A lot of the judgments that occur are coming from a reactive state. I just did a 6-week thing with Donald Rothberg on judgments, and what's really sitting below that judgment, that reactivity, a lot to my own pain and stuff and how I react to it. That seems to also have fallen apart. There's a really big space there where really the form of just, instead of contracting and reacting, it's that idea of liberation, expansion at that moment, that liberating kind of quality that these all have.
Nice.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Great to hear you about your practice and having done that 6-week program.
I think we have one more time for one more question. Brian.
Okay.
Yes, John, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that there were 4 qualities of the heart, and one of them was equanimity. And I thought the other 3 you had said were loving kindness, compassion, and supporting joy. Mm-hmm. I was curious if you could elaborate on the difference between, like, say, just pure joy and supporting joy.
Supportive joy is a recognition of the happiness of others and wishing it to continue. So that's a specific form of joy. In this case, the Buddha is speaking to. The Pali word is mudita. Some of you may know that by that word. So the Buddha said joy comes forward in many ways with practice. There's a joy of just being mindful. There's a joy in practicing generosity. There's a joy in feeling gratitude. There's a joy that arises in recognizing the happiness of others. This is the supportive joy. So many, many ways that joy comes forward in the practice. So this is one particular way. That answer the question?
Yes.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. Let's have a time for a little announcements now. Anybody have an announcement they want to make?
I just want to say, in case anybody's wondering, we had talked about reopening in the middle of September. That's been delayed till middle of October at least.
Great. Thanks for that. Jerry, do you want to mention the retreat?
Yes. For right now, we have a retreat planned at Land of the Medicine Buddha with Stephen Tierney as our teacher. It's going to be November 12th through the 14th. And probably next week, around after the first Labor Day, we'll have information about signing up for it.
Great. I will also remind us all about Dana, and please give generously. We still have expenses, even though we're on Zoom, for the programs that we support and for our speakers. It's important, and I know it's easy to just sign off and forget about it, but please go to the website and donate. I think that might be it for today. Let's close. Let's join in an imaginary circle, a circle of trust and understanding and mutuality, and think through these words together. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you all. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Have a great Sunday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.